y'all, welcome back to this week's episode of AMA Friday with Amy Miller, Recruiting in Yoga Pants. So this week we're going to tackle right to represent. What is it? How do they work? And should you, as a job seeker, sign one? Well, once again, I ruffled feathers on the internet. A gentleman posted about a staffing agency that had reached out to him, and he was a little concerned, which rightfully so, because there's a lot of job search scams out there. I have a video on how to avoid scams. I will link to that up above, so you can go check that one out when you're done with this video, or go watch it now and come back, whatever. I don't care. Just make sure you watch this one too, okay? All right. But he did, have some concerns. This agency was asking him to sign a right to represent agreement, which is what we're going to talk about this week, as well as they asked for a copy of his driver's license. So needless to say, I was seeing some of these. I was concerned and I said, no. Do not sign that. Do not give anyone your driver's license. They don't need that at this early stage. Well, some of my agency friends were a little unhappy with me for telling people not to sign an RTR. So what is an RTR and when might it make sense for you to actually sign it? First of all, the most important thing I hope to leave you with today, as always, is the right questions to ask. I don't have all the answers. No single recruiter, thought leader, content creator, coach, whatever has all the answers. My goal is to give you information based on 25 years in recruiting, both agency and corporate, and to empower you to ask questions. Okay? This is your career, your job search. You deserve to know all of the facts. So what is an RTR? So a right to represent document or agreement basically says that you are giving permission to this recruiter at that agency to represent you in your job search. Now, RTRs can look different. It can be a broad RTR that, hey, I'm your person and anything that this agency ever sends you for, like I own you. Candidate ownership is a big topic in recruiting. We should maybe dedicate a video to that in the future. Let me know if that would be interesting, because it's goofy. And I have a lot of thoughts on it. But that, for another time, if you're interested, drop a comment down below. Let me know if you want me to go on a rant about that. But an RTR can be broad. It can basically lock you in that any opportunity that this agency might have that they want to submit you for, like you're locked in as, you are their candidate and they are the procuring cause for, how you got into consideration with an organization. Now, other RTRs, and this is where some of the agency folks were kind of losing their minds with me a little bit. Sorry, not sorry. Is they're saying, oh, no, it's not like that. It's just specific to this one job and it's required by our clients. Okay, assuming that that's accurate and it's worded specifically that way, I might be okay with that, right? I'm not telling you you should or should not sign one. I want you to go into this eyes wide open, asking the right questions, okay? So in order to understand the pros and cons of the RTR, you have to understand how companies engage with staffing agencies. The only reason that I can think of, if there's other reasons that I'm not aware of, drop them down below. I will happily do the research to make sure I'm not missing something important here. I don't think I am, but maybe. Leave me a note. The only reason an agency would need to do this is if they are submitting you to a company that is working with multiple recruiters for the same job. Once again, this becomes important. This idea around ownership and this idea around, this particular agency being the, procuring cause or the but for, they would not have seen your information but for this recruiter submitting you, is if multiple recruiters are working on the exact same job. So the agency wants to protect themselves. Understandably so. I get it. I understand the why, even if I don't like that it has to happen. But I understand the why. And the why is there are shady agencies out there that will grab your info off LinkedIn and submit you to a client without your permission and without your knowledge, which is really kind of terrifying. This is actually an argument for not having your resume on the internet, whether you're posting it on your LinkedIn profile, which I tend to be a fan of in most cases, but maybe not always, or even job boards. Like, there are shady recruiters who will grab your info and make you a candidate and submit you through what we call a VMS or a vendor management system, and hope that, if their client is interested in you, that they'll get a call. And then inevitably what happens, because they've never even had a conversation with you, is the client says, oh, hey, you submitted Amy Miller. Yeah, they look good. We want to do an interview. And then you're like, oh, well, gosh, yeah, actually we just placed Amy with one of your competitors. But you know what? I've got 3 other people that might look good for you. Shady, 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 y'all. Now, please understand, most agencies are staffed with good, decent recruiters who are really trying to do their best work for their clients and for their companies. But like every industry, we have our share, maybe more than our share, of bad apples. So that right to represent is a safeguard for the agency and to a lesser degree for you as well, where if there is no R2R, the company may say, I don't believe this is your candidate. So it is entirely possible, here's reason number 1, it is entirely possible that the company that this agency is working with is requiring this R2R. They will not accept submissions without confirming, which is a good thing, without confirming that you are indeed a viable candidate from that agency. Why else would this be a good idea? Second reason is it protects you from being caught up in a duplicate submission scenario. Okay, so I've seen this happen. Well, I shouldn't say I've personally seen it happen. That would not be accurate. I've heard of it happening. It's never happened to any of my candidates. I've heard stories though, so we're going to assume those stories are true. I read it on the internet. It must be true. No, actually, I've had friends who have complained about this as well. Companies who get the same resume from more than one source will just disposition and say no. That's really shitty. If you are genuinely interested in the role, you were genuinely submitted by an agency you trust, and you don't get a chance to be considered for the role because some other jackass agency pulled something shady. An R2R can potentially overcome that, because the argument is then, well, actually, I spoke to this person about this job, confirmed their interest, confirmed they were okay with me submitting them. The other agency should be kicked off the PSL. Not me. I'm good. PSL, preferred supplier list. That's another little industry term we use with large accounts. I feel like we should talk about this in a future video. Let me know. Drop a comment. I think this whole VMS, PSL, agency, national accounts, there's a lot that we could talk about there. What do you think? Okay, back to R2Rs. The cons. If they are too broad, could be limiting. If you are not confident that this agency, that particular recruiter, has the in or has the direct communication with the hiring manager, it could actually prevent you from applying directly to the organization in the future. It could prevent you from being represented by an agency that has a stronger relationship with the company. There are risks, and unfortunately, those are risks that you will not be able to mitigate, Because if you ask all these recruiters, hey, you're the third recruiter I've heard about this job from, which one of you has the real partnership? Every single one of them is going to raise their hand and go, oh, it's totally me. Don't listen to those other two. How do we know for sure? We don't. So there's a risk. I don't want to tell you not to sign an RTR. I understand the logic behind it. I understand why agencies may require it, especially if their client companies are requiring it. For me, y'all, it's a bit of a gray area, okay? And I think as a job seeker, if I were actively on the market, I were looking at roles and I was interested in contract roles, because this is a lot of times we're going to see this more with contracting, hourly type, or not necessarily hourly, but that's probably hourly, contracting roles where you're actually an employee of the agency and you're just going to go do work at the client company. Probably a little more common. I'm gonna have to think about it. I want to read the fine print. I want to make sure that I am only being represented for this one submittal at this one client. That's it. I am not signing a broad one. I'm not committing to any particular agency. I'm not making any promises to anybody. But I would consider, if I really thought the job was interesting, everything else worked for me, and the recruiter was actually able to give me some indicators that they have successfully placed people through this method before, it might be worth thinking about. So here's a specific question that you can ask. So you get that R2R, right? You get that piece of paper, you get that email, whatever. Ask the recruiter, when was the last time you placed a candidate with this organization? How many contractors do you currently have working at that organization? How often do you get to communicate directly with the hiring authorities at that organization? These are all very telling signs of the odds that you will actually get invited to interview and potentially get an offer. How many contractors do you have with this client? Or how many placements have you made with this client? When was the last time you made a placement with this client? And how often do you communicate with the hiring authorities? These are very reasonable questions, and any recruiter who's not comfortable answering them, I'm not saying it's a red flag. I'm just saying it might be something to consider. All right, y'all. Let me know down below what questions you might have about this topic. Would it be interesting to dive into the broader agency partnership, particularly with these large companies that use things like VMSs and PSLs? And we will see you next week.